To start out with, you have to cut out the blanks. Now, I don't measure anything. I look for defects in the wood, and then I mark my blanks around that to use that as a feature. The next step is to cut them all out. I usually cut enough for the amount of time that I have allotted that I'm going to be working on them. Most of the time I work in 1 hour increments, so I'll cut out 6 vases because that's how many I can do in an hour. The next step is to determine the top and the bottom, and then I mark the center. I don't measure anything, I just kind of eyeball it. I do this to all of them at the same time. The next thing is to tap the spur drive into all 6 of them before I get started. At this point, I mount it between centers and I cut the tenon, and I do this to all 6 of them at the same time while I have the same setup on the lathe. Okay, the next step is to square up both ends and then cut the tenon. Then I use the mark from the live center and I drill a pilot hole into each one of them. The drill bit goes into the chuck and I use the tool rest as a stop. I wear a glove to protect my hand, and I put the blank in the tailstock and I use that to drill the hole. And I'll do that to all 6 of them at the same time while I have this same setup. Now I can change out the chuck to a different one that I'll use to hold them with the tenon. I use the tailstock to center it and then I tighten it down. Then I move the tailstock out of the way. I start by doing the end, and I will turn it and finish it at the same time. And at this point, I complete each vase before I move on to the next one. I didn't realize that this was out of focus, so I apologize for that. Now here I'm just turning the end of it, and I do this to the desired depth I want. And then once this is done, I'll begin sanding, and then I'll put finish on this before I move to the rest of it. My goal is to start out with 180 grit, and then I sand it up to 500, and then at that point I'll put the finish on. The finish I use is a homemade friction polish, and basically it's 1 part shellac, 1 part boiled linseed oil, and 1 part denatured alcohol. I've been noticing that the finish starts to fade after a few days, so I'm going to up the amount of shellac. I think I'm going to go 2 parts shellac and then 1 part of the rest, and see if that makes a difference. Now I bring the tailstock up, and I loosen the chuck before I tighten the tailstock, because I've found that sometimes the blank isn't centered, and if I tighten the tailstock it puts a bind on the blank, and I've actually had them break on me before. Now I'm ready to finish turning the outside of the vase. I turn it to the shape I want, I sand it all down and finish it, and then I part it off, and then I just continue that with the rest of the blanks. When I'm doing these in batches, I try to do the same design vase for all 6 of them, and I notice that once you start doing it, you kind of just get in a rhythm, and you can finish them up pretty fast. Now I'm ready to part it off. Now most of the time the way that I do it is I use a skew chisel, and I'll make a few slicing cuts along the bottom, and that gives me a smooth finish, and then I'll just part it right off of the tenon. Another way that I do it sometimes is I'll mount the drill bit in the chuck, and then you can put the vase onto the drill chuck or onto the drill bit, and then you can turn the bottom of it that way also. Then I sand the bottom of it and I'll put finish on it, and then I'm done with that vase and I'll move on to the next one. Okay, that wraps up this series on making money wood turning. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got something out of it. Please give it a like if you did, and consider subscribing, and thank you so much for watching.